Lena and Pavel met in the company of mutual friends. They liked each other right away. It quickly became obvious to everyone. After the party, the young people started dating and discovered that they had a lot in common, the same favorite films, books, and even views on life. They felt good and calm with each other. Pavel often told his beloved that he was grateful to fate for their meeting. Lena felt the same. This nice and slightly modest guy quickly became the closest person in the world to her. At the time of their meeting, both had just graduated from universities. Lena became an elementary school teacher, and Pavel received an engineering degree and got a job at a plant. During his student years, he also did not sit without work, worked as a courier, a car washer, a waiter in a café. In general, he got by as best he could. He was from a poor family and understood perfectly well that in order to graduate from university, he needed to earn money himself. The guy dreamed of higher education from an early age. His stepfather toiled as an ordinary worker at a construction site. The mother had only finished 9 grades and worked occasionally as a cleaner. From an early age, Pavel decided to become a man, get a diploma of a qualified specialist, make a career, and systematically move towards his goal. Lena was raised only by her mother, so she did not see any luxury or excesses in her childhood. The nurse's salary was only enough for the bare necessities. But Lena, unlike her husband, had a great relationship with her mother, who always understood her and supported her in everything. While her daughter was studying at the university, the woman took on part-time jobs, just so that her child would not be distracted from getting an education. There was no talk of Lena going to work then. She would still have time to take on labor duties. That's how the mother reasoned. Let her daughter's childhood last at least for a little while. Pavel was reluctant to talk about his early years. Lena realized that his mother drank a lot then, changed partners, and practically did not take care of the child. It seemed that little Pavel was even going to be taken to an orphanage, but then his mother-in-law somehow came to her senses and settled down. She met a worthy man, Pavel's stepfather, who helped her overcome her addiction. Life became much easier, but Pavel held some kind of resentment towards his mother. He did not tell her, but the humorous Lena noticed it. At first, the woman tried to ask her beloved about the past. She needed to know what had happened to him. It seemed to Lena that there was some kind of psychological trauma. The girl really wanted to help her loved one cope with it. But Pavel masterfully avoided the conversation, either changing the topic, or reducing everything to a joke, or simply brushing it off or pretending not to hear. And Lena gave up these attempts. The time will come, he will tell her himself. She cannot influence the past, but she will try to make Pavel's present and future happy and joyful. This is definitely within her power. When Pavel asked her to become his wife, Lena didn't even think about it. Of course, yes. She couldn't even imagine her life with anyone else, but her mother wasn't very happy with her daughter's choice. Not about that, a husband. I dreamed of you. Oh, not of that. She shook her head when Lena told her the good news. Every month, looking at the only strip on the test, Lena cried. I desperately wanted to feel like a mother, to give a little person my love and care. And Pavel dreamed of heirs. Of course, he pretended that everything was fine. What's the hurry? We'll make it. They're still young. But Lena saw the way he looked at the children and their friends. Pavel enjoyed messing around with boys and girls of different ages. He was able to find an approach to each. The woman understood that her husband would become a wonderful father, but they still couldn't have a child. The ordeal with doctors began. Lena was diagnosed with health problems, which were the cause of infertility. On the day Lena learned of the diagnosis, she barely crawled home. Tears blurred her eyes. Her head was buzzing. Everything turned out to be very, very serious. Her chances of becoming a mother were negligible. Lena felt guilty and unworthy of Pavel. If he had chosen another wife, he would have been nursing the long-awaited heirs long ago. And what now? Long treatment and unclear prospects. But her husband supported her. What's gone wrong? He said then, hugging his wife by the shoulders. The main thing is that we found the cause. Now we will get treatment and everything will work out. You'll see. The treatment required a lot of effort, time and money. The lion's share of the salaries of both spouses now went to paying for expensive medications and procedures. Lena had to visit clinics often, endure pain, and go on diets. Pavel supported his wife as best he could. I'm sorry you have to go through all this, he said once. I can see how this treatment is affecting you. You don't look like yourself anymore. Lena understood that her husband was right. She had grown thin, was constantly nervous and irritated. Fatigue and despair became her constant companions, as well as hope, which melted away with each passing month. At first, Lena believed that the treatment would give quick results, and she did everything the doctors said, strictly followed their instructions. But time passed, and nothing happened. Every month the woman was disappointed. Heavy thoughts haunted her. Why do they have this? Everyone around her has children easily, even those who, in fact, are not worthy of them. Here is her mother-in-law, Pavel's mother. Now she keeps herself in check. But before, she drank and changed men. Traces of that life remained forever in her appearance, and she gave birth to such a wonderful healthy son, whom she had not been involved with for a long time. And there are many similar examples. Why is it that in a family where spouses love and respect each other so much, a baby is not born? It was painful for Lena to walk past the shop windows with baby products. She almost stopped communicating with her friends who had babies. And seeing a happy mother with a stroller on the street, the woman hurried to cross to the other side. When after 3 years of intensive treatment Lena still did not get pregnant, the doctor offered her IVF. It turns out that he had already put her on the waiting list, but forgot to warn her. And now the time has come. The procedure itself was paid for from the budget. It was only necessary to buy some medicines. This turned out to be very convenient, because the family did not have extra money at the time. Everything that they managed to save was spent on treatment that did not bring results. The offer of IVF was unexpected, but Lena did not hesitate for a second. Yes, she was well aware of all the health risks, but she didn't care. The main thing was that the long-awaited baby would appear in their apartment, and the room prepared for the child would finally stop being empty. The hope that had already faded raised its head. She perked up. For the first time in a long time, the woman felt a surge of energy and inspiration. Lena thought that her husband would be happy with the news, but he accepted it without much enthusiasm. You understand that this is very harmful to your health. Horse dosage hormones are not vitamins. The consequences can be disastrous, and no one guarantees the result. Don't say that, Lena exclaimed. There will be a result. There definitely will be, I can feel it. Maybe, but this is his treatment, since it doesn't work. Let's take a child from an orphanage. Look how many of them are abandoned. What? Lena choked with indignation. There had always been harmony between her and Pavel. Usually he understood her even without words. How can her husband suggest this to her? Take someone else's child, when they are about to have their own, so dear, beloved and long-awaited. Well, why are you so hostile right away? Pavel's dream was calm and conciliatory. I've been thinking about this for a long time. I just haven't told you. It hurts to watch you suffer. But we haven't even tried all the methods yet, Lena objected. She had to make an effort not to yell at her slow-witted husband. Do you hear what I'm telling you? Or not? We had the opportunity to undergo the IVF procedure for free. Can I really miss such a chance? Mockery of your health? So be it. I'm ready to do this for the sake of the baby. For the sake of our own baby. Why do we need someone else's? Only children of alcoholics end up in orphanages. Future criminals. Genes are a terrible force. Nothing good comes of such things. I almost ended up in an orphanage. Once. Pavel wrote pronunciation. His eyes filled with sadness, as always when he remembered his childhood. It was not easy for him then. Lena felt ashamed. She knew this story. Pavel's mother had sunk completely then. She did not work. She drank constantly. The child ate practically foraged food, and what compassionate neighbors treated him too. Pavel was about 5 to 6 years old then. A tiny baby. Of course, those around him understood that the boy was in danger. Someone called the Child Protection Services. By a lucky coincidence, Pavel's mother was in good health at the time, but the peculiarities of her lifestyle were, of course, noticeable to the naked eye. The mother's instinct suddenly flared up in his mother. She managed to defend her son then, to keep him in the family. For this, she even got a job. Or maybe it would have been better for me in an orphanage, Pavel thoughtfully noted when he told his wife this episode in his biography. The Child Protection Services began to visit their little room often for inspection. The mother understood that she was on the hook, and so she held on. She cleaned, cooked some simple food, worked. They hired her janitor in the local housing association, and then a new love and another move to another city, where everything went back to the old way. Pavel's mother was never enough for long. I could have ended up in an orphanage too, Pavel said, looking into his wife's eyes. But I wouldn't grow up to be a criminal or a marginal. Of course I wouldn't, Lena smiled at him. You're a very good person, the best and kindest. Much kinder than me. since you're ready to take someone else's child and raise him as your own. I can't do that, understand? I understand, and I won't pressure you. But about IVF, think about it. Why ruin your health? After all, you can live for yourself. In extreme cases, people live without children. But Lena was categorically not ready for such a life. She would become a mother, period, and no trials were scary to her. Is IVF harmful to health? No matter, she will fix it, if only to hear the cherished mommy from the little person. The first time, Lena was implanted with 2 embryos. After the procedure, she carried herself like a glass vase, carefully and gently. A happy smile played on her face. The woman dreamed that both would take root. Then they would have twins, a boy and a girl. It would be a real miracle. Lena was already mentally planning a nursery for her daughter and son. She imagined where she would put the cribs, where she would place the changing table. The difficulties associated with caring for 2 babies at once did not frighten her. She had been waiting for the baby for so long that these chores were only a joy. For 10 days, the couple lived in a state of expectation. Pavel did not let his wife do anything around the house. He cooked and cleaned himself, tried to please his beloved with good news. Alina kept listening to herself, catching the early signs of pregnancy. Over the years of planning, she had combed through many thematic sites and knew perfectly well what a woman should feel at the initial stage. And the signs were there. Her stomach was pulling and tingling. Her taste preferences changed. She had a brutal appetite. Lena was impatiently awaiting the onset of toxicosis. This obvious symptom that women usually suffer from would have made her the happiest in the world, but it was still too early for it. Lena, of course, could not stand it and began doing tests long before the time had come. They consistently gave 1 strip. The woman, hoping to see the ghost of a second line, looked at the tests for a long time. Pavel only sighed, looking at this. It soon became obvious. Nothing worked. Lena was overcome with despair. She had never experienced such disappointment. She had so much hope for the IVF procedure. The woman cried into her pillow at night, thinking that Pavel did not see it. But he noticed everything. He was also in pain. He was worried about his wife and did not know how to help her. This feeling of helplessness weighed on her. The doctor then reassured her, saying that it rarely worked the first time, so a month later there was another attempt. However, it also did not bring results. Then Lena underwent the procedure for the 3rd time, then the 4th. The 5th time the woman had almost given up hope, but still cried over another negative test. The doctor said that now the body needs to rest, and then a new protocol. Some people only succeed on the 8th or 9th try. No, Pavel said when Lena told him about her visit to the clinic. You will not torture yourself anymore. Let's take a break. This time the woman did not argue. She felt exhausted mentally and physically. Her spiritual resources were exhausted to the bottom. She would not have survived another disappointment, and she was perfectly aware of this. Pavel was right. She needed to take a break, distract herself, do something, because in recent years all her thoughts and actions were devoted to only one goal, the birth of a baby. Lena had forgotten that life was not limited to this. She could not even remember the last time she had read anything other than books on the topic of reproduction. Pavel no longer brought up the subject of the child from the orphanage, but Lena herself began to think about it more and more often. There was almost no hope for her baby, and the need to give the tiny creature care and attention grew. After all, not all children from the orphanage are descendants of alcoholics. And even if you are unlucky with your biological parents, a lot depends on your upbringing. What is Farwak? Her husband, her beloved Pavel, the kindest, most decent person on earth, and he almost ended up in an orphanage. And there are probably many such good people there. She didn't even try to look. So little by little, Lena got into the habit of looking through the profiles of orphans. The decision had not yet been made. She had not even discussed anything with her husband. The woman was simply suddenly interested in this topic. Lena had mixed feelings when she saw the photographs of abandoned children. She felt sorry for these little ones, who were so unlucky at the very beginning of their lives. But also, the woman was terrified of the prospect of taking one of these babies into the family. Many of them literally had serious diagnoses written on their faces, and most of them also had several more brothers and sisters, and they can only be adopted together. They are not separated. This is fair, but get her 2 older teenage brothers. Lena really wanted a daughter, a sweet girl, whose hair can be braided and who is so nice to dress up in pretty dresses. She would buy her dolls. They would become real friends. And daughters, as they say, are more affectionate and attentive to their parents. Pavel also dreamed of becoming a girl's father. Even at the beginning of planning, when it seemed that happiness was just around the corner, the man mentioned it more than once, said that he would be her protector and wall, and even promised to learn how to iron dresses and do girls' hairstyles. It sounded very touching. All the men Lena knew dreamed of sons, and her Pavel was waiting for a daughter. Yes, he would have been just the perfect father for their princess, but it did not happen, it did not come true. And it is unlikely that it will happen. Probably, because of the dream of a daughter, Lena paid more attention to the profiles of orphan girls. Some of them were even very pretty, but completely alien. Lena did not feel even a hint of warmth when looking at these photos and videos. Pity, yes. The desire to become a mother of one of these scrogs, no. But once she became interested in this topic, Lena continued to methodically look through the profiles. Little by little, Lena came to the conclusion that she would have to live out her life without children. She could not have her own. Adoption was not for her. It was a shame, painful, sad. But what can you do? It happens. An example is Lena's own aunt. She lived her whole life for herself, did not worry. She went to resorts, had affairs. In the end, she married a foreigner and moved to Australia with him. And again a beautiful, comfortable life. The man has adult children. They accepted their father's wife as their own. Lena did not remember her aunt ever regretting the lack of her own child. On the contrary, she sympathized with her sister, Lena's mother, who had to raise her daughter alone. Lena, of course, wasn't planning to go to Australia, but she started making plans for the future in which children don't take center stage. It's high time to turn the empty room into a home gym. Now she and Pavel will keep fit, and she definitely won't participate in the new IVF protocol. And she's already shaken her entire nervous system with vain hopes, and she's probably damaged her health. No, that's enough. Well, or even later, definitely not in the next 5 years. That day, Lena was sitting in an empty classroom, drinking coffee. She had a small window. Her third graders had gone to physical education. The woman decided to take advantage of this moment to rest and relax a little. She didn't feel like checking the quotes. She'd have time. Her brain was resting while the woman was looking through advertisements for creams and the range of her favorite online stores. And suddenly the search engine gave her a couple of orphan profiles again. New portfolios of children who needed a family had appeared on one of the most popular sites. Lena looked through the profiles of 2 girls out of habit. Small and relatively healthy, but alien. Absolutely alien. Mechanically, the woman went to the page of the new boy, enlarged the photo and was dumbfounded. A child of about 6 years old, amazingly similar to Pavel, was looking at her. The same big gray-green eyes, the same jaw, upturned nose, stubbornly compressed lips, strong-willed chin and hair. Unruly chestnut hair. Lena continued to examine the baby. It can't be. He even has a mole on his neck exactly the same as her husband's. What a coincidence. Lena had always dreamed of a daughter. She hadn't even looked at the boys' profiles, but this boy immediately captured her heart. She felt something special, a mixture of pity, warmth and tenderness. Pavel could have ended up in an orphanage, just like this Yegor Savalyev, and at about the same age. Probably, 6-year-old Pavel looked exactly like this boy. Her heart sank. Lena looked at the information about Yegor more closely. The child is healthy, no brothers or sisters. Judging by the description, he is a smart and curious kid. However, this is noticeable even by his look. Over the years of working with elementary school children, Lena has learned to understand children. And Yegorka was clearly one of the smart and active ones. The woman tore herself away from the monitor and thought. She had almost come to terms with the fact that she would never be a mother. And Pavel too. And now, Yegorka. It was so strange, how many photos of Aben. Don't babies she had looked at, and none of them had evoked such feelings in her. Lena made up her mind. She dialed the number of the orphanage where Yegor was being raised. It turned out that the institution was in a neighboring city. They told her that the boy had not yet been adopted. He was practically healthy, only very anxious. His mother, who was raised at the orphanage, had an accident and died. They had no relatives, so the baby ended up with them. Such trouble-free children do not stay for long. Adoptive parents line up behind them, so the director of the orphanage advised Lena to quickly prepare all the necessary documents and go through the school for adoptive parents. Otherwise they would be beaten to it. Lena hung up. They have so many things to do now, and they need to act quickly. She didn't even want to think about the fact that someone else could take Jaeger. He was their son, he was the spitting image of Pavel. Something told her that the boy had the same character. Kind, understanding, reliable. We need to hurry. Pavel was sitting over another report, and then his wife called him. When he heard her excited voice on the phone, the man immediately realized that something had happened. Pash, I have news for you. Simply wonderful. It seems that you and I are going to have a son. Are you pregnant? No. I found a profile of a boy in the orphan database. He is the spitting image of you. This child will live with us. You'll like him too, you'll see. Wait. I don't understand anything. You didn't want someone else's child, did you? And this is not someone else's. He's ours, ours. You'll see and understand. You don't mind, do you? Of course not, Pavel assured. He himself has suggested this option to his wife more than once, but she categorically refused. And then this. It's just somehow unexpected. You need to get used to the idea. You have until the evening to get used to it. And then we have a lot of things to do. You need to go to school for adoptive parents and collect a whole package of documents. By the way, get a certificate of salary from your place of work. Today. Okay, of course. Pavel pressed the reset button and thought about it. He was definitely happy with his wife's decision. Finally, they will have a child. They will become mom and dad. That's great. But the man wanted to take a baby from an orphanage not only to fulfill his parental instincts. He had an unpaid debt, a promise he failed to keep, and this act could partially atone for his guilt before his sister. Pavel did not tell anyone about Vika, not even Lena. It was too hard. The man tried to forget everything that happened to him many years ago, in his distant childhood. Sometimes he succeeded. Everyday worries distracted him, work occupied all his thoughts. But sometimes memories fell on the man with an unbearable weight. Vika, little sister, the closest and dearest person on the whole earth. Where is she now? Vika was 2 years older than Pavel. At the time when everything happened, she was almost 7. Their mother had completely lost her human appearance, drank heavily, brought crowds of friends and girlfriends, the same lovers of strong drinks, to their tiny room in the dorm. She did not spend any time with the children. Everyone literally lived on the food they found. Considering that it was winter outside, it was hard. Kind-hearted neighbors, of course, fed the little ones. And the little ones also collected bottles. Fortunately, there were plenty of them left after the boisterous libations of their mother's friends, and handed over the glass containers for pennies. Sometimes one of the men who constantly lived in the house would slip them a few bills. That's how they lived. The brother and sister did not go to kindergarten. Vika was supposed to go to first grade the following year. She was really looking forward to it. She wanted to study, wear a nice uniform, communicate with her peers. For Pavel, his sister was everything. Protection, support, comforter. The little one felt that this was the only person on earth who truly loved him. And he repaid Vika in kind. The children equally divided between themselves everything they managed to get. Bread, candy, pies. Unfortunately, there were many dangers in the lives of the little ones. Therefore, both were always on the alert. Even the little ones slept lightly, jumping up at the slightest suspicious sound. And how could it be otherwise, if in their still so young years they had to save themselves more than once? Once, one of their mother's friends almost burned down their room. Another time, another drinking buddy started a fight. This happened often. The children periodically became witnesses to showdowns. But this time, the man crossed all conceivable and inconceivable boundaries. With wild eyes, he waved his fists, without looking at who was in front of him. Vika then dragged her sleepy, younger brother by the hand to the neighbors. That's where they spent the rest of the night. Neighbors. Vika and Pavel had seen a lot of them, because their mother often moved and dragged the children everywhere with her. People around them treated their small family differently. Some looked with disgust at the fallen woman with 2 small children. Some pitied them and helped as much as they could, with clothes, food, a kind word. There were also those who called the brother and sister homeless and marginal to their faces. The most dangerous were the children. Vika and Pavel felt like strangers. Usually, guys from normal families did not include them in their games. But ignoring is not the worst thing. In every place there was a group of boys and girls who knew that no one would protect them, and they did whatever they wanted. Vika and Pavel were pushed into the mud more than once, pelted with stones and earth, even had gum rubbed into their hair. Having grown a little older, the boy tried to protect Vika, but his strength was clearly not enough to withstand his older rivals. The girl cried every time after a clash with these little animals. Pavel consoled her, stroked her hair, and said that everything would be fine with them. He promised that he would grow up, become strong and rich, and then no one would dare to lay a finger on them. Vika smiled through her tears and shook her head sadly. She always calmed down quickly next to her brother, but, as Pavel now understood, his sister knew that the life scenario he had invented was impossible. After all, the girl was 2 years older and understood things better. Already an adult, Pavel understood. Vika most likely had a unique talent. The girl knew how to compose wonderful fairy tales, and she did it so smoothly and coherently when Pavel took it for granted. But now, as a grown man, he was perplexed as to where a girl whose mother had never read a book in her life could get such a style, where she drew inspiration. How wonderful plots were born in her smart little head. And the main question, if only she could get into a good family, what heights in the field of writing she could achieve. Pavel believed that his sister would have success. Oh, that subjunctive mood. It was better not to think about it, otherwise he would again get angry at her mother, who, instead of working and taking care of the children, led a company and lived at the expense of alcoholic suitors. She saw no other way to earn money for herself. She did not care that her son and daughter were regularly exposed to danger, walking without supervision. She did not care that they were fed and clothed. This life suited the woman just fine. And the children, they didn't know any different, and so they didn't complain much about their fate either. They took everything for granted. Such families still exist today, only now they are talked about more often. The children are looked after by guardianship authorities. Back then, everything was different. No one was particularly interested in the fate of the two little ones. Vika and Pavel didn't have toys or books either. Therefore, one of little Pavel's favorite pastimes was listening to stories that his sister made up on the fly. The girl told amazing tales about a variety of characters, buttons that came to life, in the puppy Toby, the sad chicken. But most of all, her brother liked the stories about the boy Ray and the girl Smeshinka. They lived in a wonderful kingdom on a cloud. Vika even showed him which one, and interesting events always happened to them. Sometimes the heroes escaped from a formidable giant. Sometimes they found themselves in a magical forest. Sometimes they traveled to the bottom of the ocean to the king of all the seas. Vika always came up with something interesting and exciting. Pavel listened with his mouth open in surprise. His sister knew how to tell stories in such a way as to keep her only listener in suspense all the time. Sometimes she would cut the story short at the most interesting point, and his brother would have to wait impatiently for the next episode. Now, remembering these stories, Pavel smiled. He had very contradictory feelings. On the one hand, he felt very cozy and warm. On the other hand, his heart was filled with anxiety. How was his little sister? What happened to her after they broke up? Was she living well now? I wanted to believe that Vika's life had turned out well. It couldn't be any other way for such a bright little person. The girl charmed those around her with her smile, gentle look, and kindness. Pavel noticed this even then, at the age of 5. Surely his sister now has a strong, good family. She is loved and cared for. Vika, what a pity that your trace has been lost. Pavel would have given a lot to meet his sister again. That year in January, his mother brought a strange man to the rented room. It was not surprising. Children were used to constantly seeing new faces. Pavel looked closely at Uncle Tolya. By the age of 5, he had learned to understand people. At least the boy immediately understood what to expect from guests. Indifference, aggression, pity, attention. At the very first meeting, Uncle Tolya seemed to him to be different from the others. Serious, even stern, decisive, too attentive. The first thing he did was kick out all his mother's friends. Then he organized the cleaning of the room, making everyone work, including the children. Mother looked at him with devoted eyes and obeyed him in everything. She even began to drink less. Only on weekends did the woman allow herself a little. Together with a new cohabitant, Uncle Tolya worked as a shift worker. He had an apartment in another city. That's where he was going to move his mistress and children. Pavel, although still a baby, understood that their life would soon change dramatically. It looked like his mother would marry Uncle Tolya. At least, he heard adults talking about it. So, he and Vika would have a father. Life became easier in material terms. Uncle Tolya earned well, there was enough for food. His mother began to cook, her husband demanded full lunches and dinners. Now the children were never hungry, and the smell of fumes in the house was replaced by the aroma of borscht and pies. True, Uncle Tolya was very strict, scolding the children for any offense. He reproached their mother for completely letting her son and daughter go. The kids tried to please the man in everything, but he always found something to find fault with. Even Vika's charming smile, which usually melted the most callous hearts, had no effect on him. What did this Uncle Tolya see in their mother? Why did he decide to connect his life with a woman of clearly antisocial behavior, and with 2 children, too? Now Pavel assumed that others simply could not stand Anatoly's despotic nature, but for his mother he was almost a god. The owner of his own living space, a shift worker with a large salary. For the sake of being near him, she was ready to endure anything. One day Uncle Tolya took it upon himself to teach Vika to read. "You'll soon be 7. Many people go to school at that age, and you still can't read," he reproached the girl when he discovered gaps in her education. She just lowered her head. She felt guilty. Pavel really wanted to hug his sister, to support her, but Uncle Tolya sent the boy away. "Don't get in the way. We're going to learn the letters now." The process was going slowly. Vika, who was usually quick-witted and grasped everything on the page, could not remember the letters. Uncle Tolya got angry, called her stupid. This made the girl withdraw into herself even more and generally stopped understanding her teacher. Lessons usually ended with Uncle Tolya throwing the ABC book away from himself and sending the girl away, after first giving her a slap in the face or a cuff on the back of the head. Pavel hated him for this. He helplessly clenched his little fists and threw angry glances at Uncle Tolya. He sometimes got into trouble for this too. Pavel calmed his little sister down, stroked her hands and hair, wiped away her tears. She would fall asleep in her little brother's arms and cling to him, shaking with sobs. The boy would have loved to be a reliable protection for her, a stone wall. But what could he do for 5 years? And Pavel also cried from helplessness and resentment. "She's so stupid," Uncle Tolya often said to Vika's mother. "She's mentally retarded. Have you shown the girl to the doctors?" "We haven't been to the clinic for a long time," the mother admitted. "But she could be as stupid as her father. It's easy. She'd be going to school soon. I'll have a hard time with her." "What kind of school is she?" Even the boy had already memorized these letters, although I hadn't taught him specifically. He just listened, hung around. "But the girl is definitely retarded. She's definitely retarded. She needs serious treatment." Pavel had indeed memorized the letters. He tried to stay close to his sister during the lesson at the diabetal, so that she would feel her brother's support and be less afraid. And, of course, he also listened to his stepfather's explanations. But Vika sat next to the teacher, tense and scared. And therefore, of course, she could not perceive the knowledge that the man was carefully trying to hammer into her head. Stress. The girl experienced colossal stress next to this strange, aggressive man. He shouted, called her a dumbass, and could hit her unexpectedly. In such a state, the child clearly had not learned enough. A talented and smart girl could not remember a single letter due to banal fear. This made her stepfather even more angry. He yelled at her again and even hit her. A vicious circle. Vika's birthday was approaching. It was not customary in the family to arrange holidays for children, and the brother and sister would not have found out about the approaching event if not for Uncle Tolya. "The girl is already 7 years old on February 20th, he said. "Her birthday is on the 20th. She needs to go through the school commission. That's where they'll give her a diagnosis." Pavel heard this and understood. This is what will make his little sister happy. He will throw her a party, give her something on her birthday. The boy had seen and heard many times what kind of celebrations they throw for other children. He and his sister had never had anything like this. But this year he will do something nice for Vika, give the girl a miracle. And maybe he will finally see her smile again. Because lately she has been walking around so sad. All because of that nasty Uncle Tolya. It was better without him, although not so satisfying. It would have been better if his mother had never met him. And little Pavel set about preparing. First, he needed to get a present, and also find money for a cake. Out of old habit, the boy went to the nearest trash cans. You can always find bottles in them. That time he was lucky. The haul was rich. At the collection point, he received enough money. True, it was not enough for a whole cake, but the boy bought a very beautiful, appetizing cake with a cherry on top for his sister, like in cartoons. Now it was time for a present. Pavel knew where to go, to the local toy store. Its windows always beckoned with bright, colorful goods. Long-haired beautiful dolls, smiling teddy bears, identical model cars. The brother and sister sometimes looked at all this splendor from the street for a long time. There was no talk of going inside. All the money that was in their hands, the children spent on food. But now it was a different matter. No matter how terrible Uncle Tolya was, Vika and Pavel had long forgotten about hunger. And with the money left over from the dacha, Pavel decided to buy the most beautiful doll for his sister. Vika had never had one. Pavel had noticed more than once how sadly his sister looked at the toys in the hands of other girls. It was warm and cozy inside the store, especially pleasant to feel here after a walk in the Sevrowski frost. The abundance of magnificent toys made your head spin. And then Pavel saw her, a beautiful doll that would definitely please Vika. The toy was wearing a long, fluffy dress, sky blue. The boy imagined his sister's joy at the sight of this princess, and his heart fluttered. At the checkout, the little boy was disappointed. It turned out that the doll was too expensive. Seeing the boy's tears, the saleswoman decided to help him. She found out how much money he had and took the young bear to another department, located in the back of the sales area. Here were not such luxurious toys, also good, but not comparable to the princess doll. And even on these shelves Pavel could not choose everything. The boy pointed to plastic dolls, rubber dogs, boxes with construction sets. The seller each time shook her head with regret. Finally, she herself laid out in front of the puzzled Pavel what his meager savings would be enough for. Not much. A jumper, a rubber ball, a lopsided bear with some kind of unkind eyes, and a small plastic airplane of burgundy color. Pavel decided to stop his choice on this one. Of course, Vika is a girl, some girly toy would suit her better. But quite recently, she learned the story of the little prince and the pilot. Heard it from a neighboring boy. They just studied this story at school. Vika incredibly liked the beautiful fairy tale. And the airplane, it was like one of the characters in this story. Surely the toy will please the girl, even if it is not a doll in a fluffy dress. Now, many years later, Pavel thanked fate for giving him a chance to arrange a surprise for his sister. He managed to please Vika, managed to demonstrate his love and care. Surely she still remembers his gifts. It was her first birthday party. They shared the cake between the two of them, as usual, and the airplane. Vika threaded a string through it and hung the toy as a decoration. This is the airplane of the pilot, the little prince's friend. It will be my talisman. Thank you very much. You have found a truly valuable thing. This airplane is magical. Pavel was proud that he managed to arrange a holiday for his little sister. Vika was happy. Her smile was the best reward for the boy, and she really liked the gift. Of course, the airplane was not magical. Even at 5, Pavel realized this. But the main thing is that his sister is happy. She did not part with her decoration even at night. She slept with the airplane around her neck. A little later, the children understood. Big changes were coming. Uncle Tolya soon had to go on shift. Until that moment, he was planning to move the new family to his city, to his apartment. Moving. Pavel was used to running around with his mother from room to room. It was even interesting. There was always hope that it would be better in a new place. And now he wanted to see Uncle Tolya's city, to see his large, cozy apartment, which he often talked about. But Vika, for some reason, was afraid of changes. She said she had some kind of bad feelings. The tales about the little boy and the little girl became very sad, and now the characters were constantly having some kind of trouble. Vika expressed her passions through her art. Now Pavel understood. The little girl was trying to cope with her anxiety on her own. Poor little thing. After all, there wasn't a single person on earth who would protect them then. At first, Pavel couldn't understand why his sister was so afraid of moving. A little later, it turned out that Vika was right. The changes really didn't bode well for her. Pavel was the first to hear the conversation about Uncle Tolya not wanting to take Vika into his new life. It happened late at night. His sister was peacefully snoring on the couch. The boy was lying nearby, but he couldn't fall asleep. His stomach ached. Mother and Uncle Tolya were sitting in the kitchen. It seemed they were drinking something. The new husband allowed their mother to drink, but only under his supervision and in limited quantities. He generally behaved with her as if she were a child, and she obeyed him without question. This man was her ticket to success. Wealthy, strong, decisive. In fact, he lived on the square. It was just happiness that such a wonderful man paid attention to her. The woman was ready to do a lot for him. "We're moving soon," Uncle Tolya said in his voice. "You should slowly pack your things, or what? What's the point in packing them? We hardly have anything. That's for sure. We'll come to my city. I'll buy most new clothes and toys. Otherwise, he'll be embarrassed in front of the neighbors, like a ragamuffin." After these words, Pavel's heart sank in anxious foreboding. Moles? Him, that is? And what about Vika? Why didn't he mention her? The boy spoke out loud, trying not to miss a single word of the adults' conversation, and soon understood what was going on. Everything turned out to be much more terrible than one could have imagined. Hey, girl, take revenge, finally, Uncle Tolia continued. Well, maybe we should take her too, the mother suggested hesitantly. It was clear that she was asking about this not for the first time. No, and that was it. It's not up for discussion. She's mentally retarded. There's a lot of trouble with children like that. They need to be taken care of. And time will pass, the girl will grow up and start acting up. I don't want to live under the same roof with a crazy woman. Oh, I'm unlucky, the mother sighed. And why is that? My son is healthy, and our daughter is abnormal. You should have drunk less, Uncle Tolia said instructively. When we start planning our own, I won't let you near a drink for 6 months beforehand. Pavel was lying on his little couch and couldn't believe what he was hearing. So they were taking him into a new life, but not Vika, because she was supposedly abnormal. And where were they going to put his beloved older sister? The boy learned the answer immediately. But, go tomorrow and register the girl in an orphanage. Say, like, a difficult life situation and so on. You can handle a boy, but you can't handle two. Shed a tear there. Okay, the mother agreed. Tolika, let's not do it tomorrow, but right before the move. Why is that? Uncle Tolia didn't understand. It was obvious that he was impatient to get rid of the girl as soon as possible. She give our son a fit, she drive us crazy day and night. He loves his sister very much. But let's give Vika away and leave right away. Everything is new there, everything is unfamiliar, so he will be distracted. Perhaps you are right. They did not talk about them anymore that evening, but what he heard was enough for Pavel. He looked at his sleeping sister and could not even imagine how he would live without her. Without her smile, without support and care, without fairy tales about the little boy and the little girl smile. He would do everything to get Vika taken away too. He would ask, beg, demand. He would try to teach Vika to read. He himself already knows how to put letters and words together. Let Uncle Tolia see that his sister is not crazy. She was just afraid of him. That is why the lessons were so unsuccessful. Pavel had barely waited for Vika to wake up before he immediately told her everything he had learned. The girl covered her mouth with her hands, and tears ran down her face. But I knew that it would all be like this, she sobbed. This Uncle Tolia hates me, and my mother doesn't care, as long as she has money. We'll persuade him, you'll see, everything will be fine. Pavel tried to calm the girl and himself. The children tried. They tried very hard. Pavel taught his sister the letters, but nothing worked. Vika was again in no condition to perceive new knowledge. She was in a terrible hurry, afraid, upset by the slightest failure. And the brother and sister simply became some kind of ideal children. They did not make noise, listened to the adults with half a glance, tried not to disturb them and not to attract attention to themselves. Vika began to make sandwiches with butter or sausage for Uncle Tolia in the mornings. The mother smiled, looking at this, and the stepfather accepted the offering to the little girl as a given, as if she was obliged to serve him. It seemed to Pavel that everything was going according to plan. His mother looked cheerful. Uncle Tolia was pleased. We're doing great, we're doing it, he said to his sister. She smiled and nodded. Her signature charming smile, which made Pavel feel so warm and calm, began to appear on her face again. But it turned out that everything was in vain. Pavel overheard the adults' conversation the day before the move again. It was an accident again. The boy entered the apartment without knocking because the door was unlocked. They simply didn't notice him. Well, the plane leaves tomorrow at 1 o'clock p.m. In the morning, register the girl in an orphanage. Okay. Pavel burst into the kitchen and threw a real tantrum. He screamed, begged, called names. All at once, he even smashed a couple of plates on the floor. Then Pavel suddenly found himself in Uncle Tolia's strong arms. The boy twitched, tried to break free. But the man was stronger, much stronger. He shook the child a couple of times. Then he looked into his eyes. Oh, how angry and irritated that look was. Pavel understood. Uncle Tolia wanted to hit him more than anything in the world right now. The man could barely restrain himself. Calm down, puppy, his stepfather whispered, or else we'll send you to an orphanage too. You're too cheeky. You're probably just like your older sister. We have the same genes. Give me back. Pavel suddenly agreed. Send me to an orphanage too. I'd rather live there with Vika. But your groups will be different, Uncle Tolia smiled. These are different buildings. They are located at opposite ends of the city, so you won't see her anyway. I hate you. Pavel screamed. He tried to wriggle away and bite his tormentor. That's why I didn't want to tell you ahead of time. The mother threw up her hands in guilt. Mom. The little boy turned to the woman in despair, without much hope, but still. Well, tell him that we won't give Vika back. Please. She's ours, our own, our beloved, and he's a stranger. My sweetie, she'd really be better off there. In an orphanage, she'd get treatment, and there will be teachers who know how to deal with people like her, with abnormal people. She's normal. Pavel tried to get through to the adults. She should give him up too. The stepfather growled, throwing the boy against the wall. It hurt, but that wasn't why Pavel started crying. And then Vika entered the room, with bread in her hands. She was sent to the store, and here the girl came back. She saw her sobbing brother sitting by the wall, her confused mother with a guilty expression on her face, her stepfather raging, and suddenly fainted. The child's body could not withstand such stress, because the girl had lived in a state of fear and hope for a long time. The mother rushed to her daughter, picked her up in her arms, and carried her to the sofa. I told you, she's sick, Uncle Tolya said. She's epileptic, and this one too, she's mental. Either give them to an orphanage today, or I'm flying out tomorrow alone. The man slammed the door and left the apartment. The mother really did take the stunned Pavel and Vika, who had barely come to her senses, by the hands and led her outside. Where are we going? The girl asked. Perhaps this was her body's defensive reaction, to forget about the traumatic conversation she had heard just a few minutes ago. Let's take a walk, the mother answered in a voice that was too quiet and gentle. They're taking us to an orphanage, Pavel reminded her gloomily. Now both of us, we'll live in different buildings, but at least in the same city. You'll be nearby, Vika smiled. This news cheered the girl up. She stroked the little airplane that always hung around her neck. First, the mother registered Vika in the orphanage. She kissed her goodbye. It was obvious that she was sorry to part with her daughter, but not so much that she would go against Uncle Tolya's will. I'll be nearby, Pavel told his sister, in another building. We'll probably meet. I hope I'll ask to visit you. And when I grow up big and rich, and even stronger, we will live happily. I will buy us a huge house, and you lots and lots of beautiful dolls. I wish it would come sooner. Vika smiled through her tears. The brother and sister hugged each other. Farewell. And then Vika was taken away. Pavel thought that his mother would take him to an orphanage, but they returned home. Why did you bring me here? The boy wondered. When are we going to the orphanage? Tomorrow. His mother answered evasively. That building is closed today. It sounded convincing and weighty. Pavel was not sent to the orphanage. He flew away with his mother and Uncle Tolya to a new big city. It turned out that his stepfather had changed his mind. He had always wanted to have a son, so it was decided to leave Pavel in the family. The boy screamed, swore, and tried to get to his sister. But what could a 5-year-old do against 2 adults? In the end, Pavel resigned himself. He was tormented by thoughts that he had not kept the promises he had made to his sister. Not of his own free will, but that did not make it any easier. Now Vika would think that her brother had betrayed her. Pavel was sure that when he grew up, he would definitely find Vika, and they would be happy. Uncle Tolya really had a spacious, beautiful apartment. There was even a separate room for Pavel. Achim tried to raise the boy, tried to become close to him, spend time with him. But nothing worked, because Pavel hated this person, the culprit of his separation from his sister. And then his mother took up her old ways. She had already played the role of an obedient, exemplary wife for too long. When Uncle Tolya went away on a shift, his mother drank heavily again. In the new city, she quickly made new friends. Everything returned to normal. Only Vika was no longer around, and Pavel had to cope with his fears on his own. Uncle Tolya did not tolerate it for long. One day, he simply kicked him and his mother out into the street. For some time, they lived with one of his mother's friends, then his mother had another suitor, who took them in. Mother and son did not live with him for long. The woman had another affair. Pavel was again wandering from one apartment to another. From time to time, his mother would place him in a social shelter for a while. The boy lived there well-fed and peacefully. It was the staff of this institution that enrolled him in school when the time came. Pavel liked studying, but it was problematic to do his homework on the windowsill in his room when there was a merry party going on right there with loud laughter and swearing. When Pavel was already in the 5th grade, a serious gentleman appeared in his mother's life again. Victor worked at a construction site and often went on business trips. At first, the boy was afraid of a repeat of the story with Uncle Tolya, but his mother's new friend turned out to be a completely different person. Kind, reliable, understanding. He immediately warmed to Pavel and accepted him. The man paid a lot of attention to the child. He taught the boy how to cook, told him stories from his own childhood. He took him fishing with him. Pavel enjoyed these wonderful moments. Never before had any adults been so kind to him. Mother became different next to Victor. She stopped drinking. She arranged things. She got a job as a cleaner and a local HOA. And these changes were not forced or threatened, as with Uncle Tolya. The woman herself wanted to become better, to improve, to create a prosperous family. One day Pavel decided to do it. It's been 6 years since Vika ended up in the orphanage, but there hasn't been a day when her brother hasn't remembered his sister. Mom, let's go back for Vika. Uncle Vitya is so good, he'll definitely accept her as his own, and we'll be happy. I've already called the orphanage, the woman admitted. They took away my rights to her, and someone adopted her, so nothing will come of it, son. Tears came to Pavel's eyes. He had so hoped that everything would be fine now. I'll find her anyway when I grow up. I'm so sorry. His mother shook her head. Only now do I understand what a mistake I made back then. Pavel grew up, finished school, and entered university. Thanks to Victor, he had a normal childhood. Like all ordinary children, he did his homework in his room at his desk and went to school parties. Friends came to visit him, and he himself was often invited to birthday parties. Pavel was involved in the football section and was interested in aircraft modeling. He tried to drive away thoughts of his past life, but sometimes terrible images still haunted him in his dreams. Unfamiliar faces of people, swearing, loud laughter, and crying Vika. His mother was now very quiet and caring, but in Pavel's heart there was resentment towards her. How could she betray her daughter, and him too, to please her boyfriend? The guy couldn't forgive his mother for his difficult childhood or for the separation from the person closest to him. Of course, when he got older, he tried to find his sister. He went to that orphanage, but found out nothing. It turned out that the mother had been deprived of parental rights to the girl. Vika was already being prepared for adoption, for which they changed her name and surname. But then something went wrong. The family abandoned the child, and then the girl was transferred to another institution, as she began to have health problems. Where exactly? There are no records of this. It happens. The tracks of his sister were lost, but Pavel did not give up. He even hired a private detective with the money he earned during his summer job at a construction site. But this hope did not come true. In despair, the guy starred in one of the episodes of a special program where people look for relatives, and he also posted ads all over the city where he and Vika once separated. There were calls after that, compassionate people who learned the touching story sincerely wanted to help, but all the leads turned out to be false. Finally, Pavel decided to forget about Vika. He tried to find his sister for a long time, and each time after another disappointment he had a hard time coming to his senses. It is very difficult to wait, hope, and then understand that you were on the wrong path again. Then Lena appeared in his life. Quiet, gentle, loving, touching. The young people got married. Pavel enjoyed family happiness and dreamed of having children together. If only they would have a girl like Vika. Only it turned out that Lena had serious health problems that prevented them from becoming parents. A long treatment began, an ordeal with doctors. Lena hoped, and each time, realizing that nothing worked out again, she got upset. Pavel understood her very well. He knew how hard it was when expectations are not met time after time. He felt sorry for his beloved, but how could he help her? One day a man had a wonderful, as it seemed to him, idea to take a child from an orphanage. A girl. He did not keep the promise given to his sister, did not take her from the shelter. But it is possible to make another child happier, left without parental warmth and attention, and everyone will be fine. His wife will finally get her long-awaited daughter. He will at least partially atone for his guilt before his sister, and the baby will find a family. Only Lena did not accept this idea. She dreamed of her own child, similar to herself and Pavel. The man respected her decision. After all, this was a very serious step. There was no way to give in here. And now this strange call from Lena. She was shouting into the phone that they urgently needed to go to a school for adoptive parents and collect documents on a list, because a son was waiting for them at an orphanage. Their son. Now Pavel was sitting at his desk, trying to comprehend what he had heard. Why had his wife's opinion changed? After all, she had been categorically against someone else's child. She had talked about the power of genes, about the hopelessness of alcoholic children, and then such zeal. She had promised to send a photo of the boy. The phone beeped. A message from Lena had arrived. Pavel opened it. I was dumbfounded. A boy of about 6 years old was looking at him from the picture, incredibly similar to him, and to Vika. What a coincidence. The same gray-green eyes, the same upturned nose, and even a mole on the cheek, like his and her sister's. Lena was right. This really was absolutely their child, and he has no place in an orphanage. Although, the man tried to cope with his feelings. First, he needs to find out more about this boy. He needs to get to know him. The first impression may be wrong. You shouldn't make long-term plans right away. The collection of documents and training at the school for adoptive parents took place in the shortest possible time. In just 2 weeks, Lena and Pavel were ready to meet their potential adopted son. At this time, his wife called the orphanage almost every day, inquired about the boy's health, found out if he had been taken into a family. Lena was very afraid that someone would adopt the child before them, because there is always a line for such wonderful children, healthy, strong, smart. Yegorka's only drawback, which reduced the demand for him, was his age. After all, people preferred to take very small children, not older preschoolers. And now, finally, they have an appointment. Tomorrow they will go to a neighboring city to meet the boy. The day before, both spouses were very worried about how the meeting would go, how the boy would accept them, what to talk to him about to win him over. Pavel and Lena were sitting in the playroom of the orphanage. Now there is no one here except them. The spouses are sitting on a soft sofa by the window. Along the walls there are shelves with toys and books. In the far corner there is a sports complex. In the spacious room here and there are cute tables with small chairs. Probably, the children like to spend time in this cozy place. The room resembles an ordinary kindergarten group, only no one takes the kids playing here home in the evening. These are children who are no longer needed by their parents. There should be no orphans in the world, Lena said thoughtfully, looking around the room. Of course, it is wonderful here, but also terrible. I can imagine how unhappy the children must feel. Perhaps they do not know any other life, answered Pavel. And then some images of his own childhood came to his mind, and the man added, it's possible that after what they saw at home, this place seems like paradise to them. Light footsteps were heard behind the door. They're leading them. The couple exchanged glances. A thin, slightly agitated boy entered the room, taut as a string, somehow swift, flying, tousled chestnut hair, attentive dark eyes, an upturned nose with freckles, just like in the photograph. But the photo did not convey the main thing: facial expressions, gestures, gait. Pavel increasingly recognized himself and his sister in this boy. The little boy met the man's eyes. A genuine interest flashed in the child's gaze. At least they had seen Jaeger in the photo, and the boy was now seeing his potential adoptive parents for the first time. And then the boy smiled. Charming dimples appeared on his cheeks, just like Vitya's. Pavel smiled back. He already understood. His heart irrevocably belongs to this little man. He will take him from here and make the boy's life happy and carefree. He will become for this Krossi the father one can only dream of. Lena also looked at Yegorka with adoration. It was clear that the boy had impressed her. Hello. Jaeger was the first to break the prolonged silence. And I like you. It is immediately obvious. Good people. Really? The teacher who entered with the boy comically threw up her hands. Pavel and Lena noticed her only now. Until then, both of their attention had been completely focused on the child. Finally, and what? You're not even going to pretend to be capricious? Nope. The boy shook his head and came closer to the visitors. A lot of people wanted to take the boy away, the teacher explained, turning to the adults. And him? No way. He doesn't like anyone and that's it. No amount of persuasion helped. And to be sure, Yegorka threw tantrums in front of the adoptive parents. I can do that, the little boy nodded. Don't get me wrong. He's a very smart and docile child. It's just that, well, he was trying to scare off parents he didn't like for some reason. Other children dream of a family, but this one. And I was waiting for you. Jaeger finished for her. And we've been looking for you all this time. Lena finally couldn't resist and hugged the child. Although she had been warned that she needed to be more reserved at the first meeting, Pavel couldn't tear his eyes away from the boy. He knelt down in front of him and carefully examined every feature of his face. How did it happen that the child looked so much like him and Vika? The teacher noticed it too. But Yegorka looks so much like his dad, she said in surprise. That's a good sign. When can we pick up our son? Pavel asked. Well, I think you can pick him up right away tomorrow morning, the teacher answered. Since you have such an idol, the psychologist will talk to Yegorka today. It's a formality. I can already see that he has accepted you. Well, and the documents need to be prepared. Well, We'll sort it out and come pick up your treasure in the morning. I'll be waiting for you very much, Jaeger admitted. I like you so much. We will be happy. Very, very happy. You'll see. I know. You're probably the little prince who's supposed to save me. You've only grown up already. What? Pavel didn't understand. Yegorka is such an imaginative person, the teacher laughed. And he's a smart one, he already reads a lot. He counts up a bunch of fairy tales, and then he makes up his own. Sometimes he goes crazy. We're amazed. Some of us even call him Little Anderson. He makes up stories. Pavel turned to the boy. Who? About different ones. Right now about the little prince. And you? Have you read a book about him? Yes, a long time ago, when she brought me books. Pavel's heart sank when he saw how Yegorka's expression changed when he remembered his mother. To distract the child a little, he asked a question, not really counting on the right answer. Do you know who wrote this story about the little prince? Of course, the French writer and pilot Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Pavel and Lena exchanged surprised glances. I told you, Jaeger is a smart boy. The teacher smiled proudly. And then, when Jaeger had already left for the dining room, this woman shared some interesting information with the boy's future parents. Here, finally, he showed himself for who he is, because he did everything in front of potential parents. Threw tantrums, pretended to have some kind of fits. He did everything so that they would not like him. Of course, people were afraid to take such a strange person, and they left with nothing. And why did he do that? Lena asked. He explained later that he did not like the parents. He said, I understand people, it will be bad for me there. After all, I felt so sorry for him. The young man did not realize that he was condemning himself to an orphan's life. So, it turns out, they liked us. Pavel clarified. At first sight, the woman answered. As soon as he saw you, he immediately opened up. I felt it. I am happy for you. And for the boy, of course. You and Yegorka will definitely be happy. The next day, Lena and Pavel were ready to go to the orphanage at 6 in the morning, but they had to wait until 10. That was the time the director returned from the planet. The rest of the day before and almost the whole night, the couple discussed Jaeger. How smart he is. Lena admired. And how cute. We are lucky that no one took him before us. Yeah, Pavel grinned. The boy tried, judging by the teacher's words. The couple happily made plans for their future life. Now the three of them. They thought about where to go on vacation, where to go for a walk with their son on the weekend, what to cook for the child so that he would definitely like it. Lena dreamed of taking her son to a shopping center and buying him a bunch of stylish, beautiful things so that he would look like the boys from fashion magazines. Pavel was looking for information about teaching children to play chess. Something told him that smart Jaeger would be captivated by this ancient game. At that moment, both spouses understood that the boy was already making progress. It would only get better and more interesting from now on. Life sparkled with new colors. Exactly at 10 in the morning, Pavel and Lena were already standing at the director's door. Who would doubt your impatience? The man who returned from the planning meeting good-naturedly noted. Please, please. The necessary papers were signed. The official conversation was over. All this took no more than half an hour, but Lena kept glancing at her watch during these 30 minutes. It seemed to her that Jaeger had already waited for them. And even, perhaps, she allowed the thought that they had changed their minds, so she wanted to finish the bureaucratic formalities as soon as possible and see her son. Pavel felt the same, only he was better able to control himself. Finally, the teachers brought Jaeger into the office. The women smiled happily. Some even wiped their eyes with handkerchiefs. The staff was always happy when another abandoned baby found a new family. Be happy, our clever boy. One of the nannies hugged her favorite and kissed him loudly on the cheek. He smiled at her a little shyly and immediately turned his gaze to his new parents. Lena was the first to lose her temper. She jumped up to the boy, hugged him, took his hand. Pavel also came up to his son, ruffled his chestnut hair with his hand. Over there, close by. He noticed it, a tiny burgundy airplane on a string. Like Vika once did, the boy wore this homemade decoration around his neck. It took a lot of effort for the man to refrain from asking questions. The child was already excited. There was no point in making him even more nervous now. And the staff of the orphanage was keeping an eye on them. They wouldn't give the boy back if they doubted the adequacy of the father. No, of course, he would find out everything, but later. Let the baby get used to it. All the way home Pavel thought about this little airplane. He answered his wife's questions automatically, even joked with her and Jaeger. And he himself would stealthily glance at the rearview mirror, in which the boy was reflected, and his little airplane on his neck. The airliner looked exactly the same as that toy from his distant childhood, which little Pavel had given to his sister Vika. Of course, many years had passed. The man could easily be wrong, and yet there were too many coincidences. The boy from the orphanage liked to peas in a pod, similar to himself, and now this little airplane. All this is clearly not accidental. Little Jaeger really liked the apartment, and he was especially delighted with his own room. The couple tried hard, arranging a nursery for their long-awaited son. Fresh wallpaper with a space pattern adorned the walls. A sports complex was located in the corner, and under the window stood the dream of any boy, a bed in the form of a car with night lights headlights. Lena put her whole soul into creating an interior that Jaeger would like. And she was right. The boy's eyes shone with genuine admiration. He was especially interested in the bookcase. The couple collected their children's library gradually. Sometimes, seeing a beautiful book with bright illustrations, they simply could not resist and bought it for the future. And now, finally, this future has arrived. Jaeger greedily ran his eyes over the spines of the books, and his face became happier and happier. The couple was lucky in this too. They got a child who, like them, loves to read. Then there was a festive dinner, ordered from a restaurant. Lena, of course, wanted to cook something herself, but Pavel said that she would still have time to impress her son with her culinary talents, and now she needed to rest. The day was not easy. After dinner, Jaeger immediately began to nod off. He was also tired of this happy day, full of bright impressions and discoveries. The new mom and dad put their son to bed and read him a bedtime story. Jaeger fell asleep with a smile on his face. He never took off next airplane. When Lena tried to do so, the boy stopped her. "No, don't, it protects me. That's what Mom said. What's it called? A talisman, here. This is the same airplane from The Little Prince. Do you understand?" "I understand," Lena nodded seriously. "Then, of course, it's not worth taking it off." "I knew that you were understanding and smart," Jaeger said, and almost immediately fell asleep. And Lena and Pavel sat in the kitchen for a long time and talked. They told stories. "Tell me in more detail how our boy ended up in an orphanage," he asked. "Man. Well, I've already told you about it," Lena shrugged. I know. I just want to hear it again to make sure I understood everything correctly." "Okay then. Igor was born to a single woman, a graduate of an orphanage. He didn't have a father. Apparently the girl gave birth to him for herself. Or maybe she came across such a man. The mother raised the boy herself. It seems she worked as a cook in a student cafeteria. They say she was a very good and positive woman, without bad habits. She took care of the child. But that's obvious, right? After all, who else but she taught him to read? And in general, Igor is very smart for his age. The child was clearly being developed. And then disaster happened. Igor's mother was hit by a driver at a crosswalk, and the boy was left alone in the whole wide world. He had no relatives, so he ended up in an orphanage. Psychologists worked with him there, helping him accept the loss. By the way, the work is not quite finished, so we will continue in our children's clinic. I never told myself about it, or anyone else. It was too painful, Pavel finally decided. But today this little airplane, and in general, I don't understand what is happening. And Pavel told his wife the story of his difficult childhood and his lost sister, not forgetting, of course, to mention the plastic burgundy airplane. Lena sat with her hand over her mouth. Tears were running down her cheeks, but she did not even notice it. "How is this possible?" she finally said. "How hard it was for you? And for your sister. So that's where you got such resentment towards your mother. And I couldn't understand it." "Well, yes, she drank, of course, but she did not abandon you. Why such coldness towards her? Now everything is clear. It's all nonsense." Pavel waved it off. "Now I am interested in something else. Is this little airplane just a coincidence? Or is Jaeger really Vika's son? That is, my nephew. If this is so, then I don't even know whether to be happy or not. On the one hand, it's happiness to know for sure that I'm raising Vika's son, at least to atone for my guilt before my sister. On the other hand, if Jaeger is her child, then Vika is definitely not alive. And her fate was not happy. My sister grew up in an orphanage. She was not taken in by a kind, rich family, as I dreamed of as a child." "Pavel, what guilt are you talking about?" Lena exclaimed. "You were just a baby when it all happened, and then you tried to look for Vika, but it was too late, all traces were lost. And you are definitely not to blame for this." "It doesn't matter," Pavel shook his head. The main thing is to find out whether Jaeger really is my nephew or not. We'll find out. We'll do a DNA test. It will show. True, we'll have to save up some money. The test is not cheap. I'll take a part-time job. I was going to anyway. Several months passed. Jaeger had completely settled into the family and made friends in the yard. He enjoyed reading, drew a lot and very beautifully, studied in the chess section, where Pavel enrolled him, and the boy also tried to help his parents in everything, washed dishes, wiped dust, always cleaned the room himself and without reminders. Every day Pavel noticed in the child an increasing resemblance to himself and Vika. The boy also, like Pavel's sister, he frowned when he tried to understand something. He clapped his hands in the same funny way and even laughed as loudly as Vika once did. That. And Jaeger also made up stories. Lena diligently wrote down each of her son's fairy tales in a thick notebook. She said that later she would take these stories to the publisher and it would turn out to be a wonderful book. Jaeger was delighted with this idea. And the airplane. The boy never parted with this toy. He even went outside with it. The neighbors' children quickly adopted the fashion, and now they were showing off around the yard with various plastic figures around their necks. Pavel put aside the money needed for a DNA test in a special account. Of course, it was possible to take out a loan and find out everything right away, but the man deliberately delayed this moment. He was afraid of the result. He himself did not understand what he wanted to hear. Lena's birthday was approaching. Jaeger was clearly preparing a picture for her as a gift. He locked himself in his room and drew something there for a long time, and if someone entered, the boy hastily covered his creation with his hand. "How nice it is," Lena once said to her husband. "Igorka tries so hard. This will be the most precious gift I have ever received for my birthday." And then, on a festive morning, when Lena and Puzzle had not yet gotten out of bed, Igor solemnly entered the room. In his hands he was holding a beautiful, bright picture. It depicted a boy, all golden and shining, and a red-haired girl smiling from ear to ear. "How wonderful, son." Lena hugged him. "I really like this picture. Thank you very much. Tell me, who is depicted in it?" The boy climbed into their bed and began to explain. "This boy is Ray, and this is his sister, a girl named Smeshinka. Some adventures always happen to them, sometimes even dangerous ones, but they are smart, brave, and friendly, and that is why everything always ends well." "Oh, how interesting." Lena smiled, stroking her son on the back. "You are a real storyteller." Pavel was dumbfounded. A wave of goosebumps ran through his entire body. His ears began to ring. Such a coincidence simply couldn't happen. Jaeger's external resemblance to Vika was okay. The little airplane wasn't 100% proof either, since Pavel couldn't remember exactly what that toy from his childhood looked like. But these characters, the little ray of sunshine and the little girl, these are definitely Vika's characters. The girl herself came up with them and all the adventures that happened to them. As a baby, Pavel listened to these stories with rapt attention and asked his sister to tell him more and more of them. "And these aren't my fairy tales," Jaeger admitted. "These are my mother who came up with them and told me about them. She said that the little girl and the little ray of sunshine live on a cloud and are friends with the little prince, and that one day the prince will arrive on this little airplane that I have on my neck and save my mother and me." And the prince did appear, but his mother was gone. Lena hugged the baby. He tried not to mention his mother, but the sensitive woman understood. The boy sometimes really wanted to talk about her and his past. She was always ready to listen to her son. "You're my mother now, of course." Jaeger smiled at her. "But she's a mother too." Of course. Lena agreed. "Be sure to tell us about her. It's important." "You know, what have I decided?" Pavel suddenly smiled at his son and wife. "We're going on vacation soon, so we'll all go to the sea together. You've probably never seen the sea before." "Nope," Jaeger admitted. "Well, I really want to." "Well, that's great. All that's left is to plan the trip. It's a very serious, but also enjoyable activity." "Hooray!" Jaeger shouted. "And the money?" his wife asked in a whisper. "Well," but he just winked at her cheerfully, as if to say, "Don't worry about it." They had money for travels, the same ones that were rolling for the DNA test. Pavel doesn't need this analysis now. It's already clear that Jaeger is Vika's son. Pavel intended to make this boy's life happy and carefree, to give him every opportunity to develop his many talents. Once he wanted, but was never able to surround his sister with care and attention. Now fate has given him a second chance. In such an unusual way she brought him together with his nephew, and Pavel was not going to miss this chance.